The heavy rain was hitting my windshield pretty hard as I sat in that dimly lit parking garage, staring blankly at my glowing phone screen. It displayed 31 missed calls from various managers at the company. Just 3 days earlier, Victor Thorne had looked me straight in the eyes with a patronizing smile and told me I was not ready for a promotion. Now, almost everyone at Apex Global Logistics was frantically calling my personal line as if the entire corporate building was on fire. My name is Thomas Vance. I am 54 years old, and until that critical conversation with my manager, I thought I knew exactly where my professional career was heading. It turns out I was wrong about many things. I have been at Apex Global Logistics for 10 years now, working tirelessly day in and day out. Before joining this corporate firm, I spent 16 years in the United States Navy, handling complex logistics operations in high-stress environments. When you are personally responsible for getting critical supplies to naval ships halfway around the world under intense pressure, you learn very quickly that minor details matter. Every system, every process, and every backup plan must work perfectly, or lives are put in danger. That disciplined naval mindset served me incredibly well in corporate America. In fact, it served me too well, making me the default problem solver for everyone in the office. When I first started at Apex Global Logistics, the operations department was a complete and total disaster. My predecessor had left without leaving any documentation, no handover notes, and absolutely no guidelines for the team. It was like walking into a massive house where someone had cut all the electrical wires and removed all the labels from the fuse box. I spent my first 6 months rebuilding the entire system from scratch. I worked until midnight most nights, came in on weekends, mapped out every single process, and created detailed guides for everything. My son Tyler was only 6 years old back then. This was about 3 years after my beloved wife Diana passed away from cancer, leaving us both to navigate the world alone. I vividly remember Tyler asking why his dad was always at work, and it broke my heart. But I foolishly thought my dedication would pay off eventually. That is what they tell you in corporate environments, right? Work hard, keep your head down, and you will eventually get recognized and rewarded with advancement. For 10 long years, I was the reliable guy who made sure everything ran smoothly. When our biggest client, Cascade Industries, had urgent requests, I was the one who stayed late to resolve them. When systems crashed, I fixed them. When operations broke down, I rebuilt them. I created training materials, documented every workflow, and basically became the institutional memory of the entire operations department. Victor Thorne became my manager about 4 years ago. He is a 55-year-old man who is very focused on big-picture strategies, executive lunches, and boardroom presentations. The main problem was that Victor never bothered to learn any of the actual operational systems we use daily. Why would he? I had everything running so smoothly that he could focus entirely on high-level planning. What I did not know was that Victor had other plans for our department. His son, Brandon Thorne, had just graduated with an MBA from Northwestern. Brandon was 32 years old, a smart man on paper, but he had never worked a single day in operations. He had never handled a logistics crisis at 2 o'clock in the morning. He had never had to explain to an angry client why their massive shipment was delayed, and he had never had to rebuild a broken system from nothing. The promotion meeting happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation showing how I had improved efficiency by 45% over the past 2 years, reduced errors by 80%, and personally managed the Cascade Industries relationship that brought in $11 million annually. Victor flipped through my portfolio for maybe 5 minutes before setting it aside with a sigh. "I appreciate everything you have done, Thomas," he said, not really looking at me, "but I have been thinking about the direction of this department. We need fresh perspectives and new energy. Brandon will be joining us next month as our Senior Operations Manager." Senior Operations Manager. That was the exact position I had been working toward for 10 years. "I see," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. "And where does that leave me?" "You will continue in your current role," Victor replied smoothly. "Brandon will need someone experienced to help him get up to speed. Someone experienced to help him get up to speed." That was the corporate translation for, I would do all the actual work while his inexperienced son got the title and the massive salary bump. I kept my expression completely neutral, the way they taught us in the Navy. I understand. Thank you for the feedback. Great, Victor said, looking relieved. I am glad we are on the same page. Brandon starts on Monday, so maybe you can prepare some detailed orientation materials over the weekend. That was the exact moment something clicked inside my head. I had been working weekends for 10 years. I had missed Tyler's baseball games, school plays, and parent-teacher conferences. I had given this company everything, and now they wanted me to spend my weekend preparing to train my own replacement. I stood up, shook Victor's hand, and walked out of his office. Instead of going back to my desk to work late, I walked straight to the parking garage and drove home. That was the evening I made the decision that changed everything. I was not going to quit in anger, nor was I going to storm out or make a dramatic scene. I was going to do something much more effective. I was going to follow my job description exactly as it was written. See, here is what Victor and the senior executives did not understand. My official job description was incredibly basic. It stated, manage daily operations within assigned scope, coordinate with other departments as needed, maintain client relationships within operational parameters. That standard corporate language did not come close to describing what I actually did every single day to keep the firm running. What I actually did was arrive at 7 o'clock in the morning to prepare detailed briefing notes for Victor's 9 o'clock meetings. I answered complex emails for 3 different departments because somehow I had become the go-to guy for any operational questions. I solved major problems before they became crises, staying late to make sure nothing exploded overnight. But my job description said 9 to 5, so that is exactly what I was going to do. I drove home that Tuesday evening and did something I had not done in years. I turned off my work phone at 5 o'clock sharp. Tyler was shocked when I walked in the door at 6 o'clock instead of 8 or 9. "Dad, why are you home so early?" he asked, looking up from his homework with wide eyes. "I decided my time is more valuable than I thought," I told him with a smile. "Do you want to throw a baseball around before we start dinner?" His face lit up like Christmas morning, and we spent the next hour playing in the backyard. For the first time in years, I was present. On Wednesday morning, I arrived at the office at exactly 9 o'clock. There were no briefing notes waiting for Victor, no getting ahead of the day's potential crises. I answered emails addressed directly to me and forwarded everything else to the appropriate departments. When my office phone rang with questions about processes that were not technically my responsibility, I politely directed the callers to the relevant department heads. By lunch, people were starting to notice the change. Laura Cooper from accounting stopped by my desk with a confused expression. "Thomas, did you see the email about the Cascade Industries shipping schedule conflict?" she asked. "I did," I replied, continuing to work on my assigned quarterly report. "So, can you fix it like you usually do?" "That is actually a logistic coordination issue," I replied calmly. "I forwarded it to the shipping and procurement departments. They will need to work it out together." Her eyebrows went up in surprise. "But you always handle these cross-department things." "I have been advised to focus more on my core responsibilities," I said with a polite smile. "I am just trying to be more efficient with my time." The look of confusion on Laura's face told me everything I needed to know. Nobody had ever bothered to understand what my actual job was supposed to be versus what I've been doing all these years. By Thursday, the cracks were really starting to show. The Cascade Industries issue had escalated significantly because the shipping and procurement departments could not figure out the workaround that I would normally handle in 10 minutes. 3 other clients had routine requests that were sitting in various departments because nobody knew the proper escalation procedures. I watched it all unfold with the detached interest of someone observing a science experiment. Every email that sat unanswered, every phone call that got transferred 3 times, and every urgent request that nobody could handle was actually documented in my comprehensive operations manual. However, it was clear that nobody had ever bothered to read it. Gregory Ward from procurement wandered by my desk around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, looking completely frazzled. "Thomas, the Beacon Freight purchase order is stuck in approval hell," he said. Can you work your magic? What seems to be the issue? I ask, genuinely curious. The system won't accept their new billing address and nobody knows how to override it. I nodded thoughtfully. That process is covered in Section 7 of the Operations Manual. The override requires supervisor approval from both procurement and accounting, but that will take hours of phone calls and emails. Back and forth, Gregory complained. It is a security feature to prevent billing fraud, I explained. It is a pretty important protection for the company. Gregory stared at me. You have always just handled these things in 5 minutes. I had special authorization from previous management to expedite certain processes, but with the department restructuring coming up, I thought it best to follow standard protocols. He walked away shaking his head, probably wondering when I had become such a stickler for rules. Thursday evening, I was home by 5:15. Tyler was working on his algebra homework at the kitchen table when I walked in. Dad, can you help me with this math problem? He asked. For the first time in months, I actually had the mental energy to sit down and focus on his schoolwork instead of thinking about work emergencies. We spent an hour working through the problems together, and I realized how much I had missed these simple moments with my son. You know, Dad, Tyler said as we finished up, you seem different this week. Different how? I asked. Less stressed, I guess. Like you are actually here when you are here. He was a smart kid. He had noticed something I was just starting to understand myself. I was reclaiming my life, and the corporate world was beginning to feel the weight of my absence. Friday morning brought the real crisis. I arrived at the office at exactly 9 o'clock to find chaos in full swing. Victor Thorne was pacing anxiously outside the main conference room. Brandon was already inside, looking completely overwhelmed. Raymond Fletcher, our regional director, had apparently been called in for an emergency meeting. The receptionist flagged me down before I could even reach my desk. Thomas, they need you in conference room B immediately. I gathered my notebook and walked into what was clearly a full-scale crisis situation. Besides Victor, Brandon, and Raymond, there were 2 people I did not recognize, who were executives from corporate headquarters. Thomas, Raymond said with obvious relief, thank God you are here. We have got a serious situation with Cascade Industries. What is the specific issue? I asked, remaining calm. Victor launched into an explanation, but it was clear he only understood half the problem. Cascade had called an emergency meeting for 10 o'clock because their implementation was failing. Brandon took notes frantically, but kept asking basic questions that showed he had no understanding of our systems. Their entire 4th quarter rollout is at risk, one of the corporate executives said. They are threatening to pull the contract if we cannot resolve this today. I reviewed the issue details they had gathered. It was actually a fairly straightforward problem if you understood the system dependencies and had access to the right documentation. This is a known issue with their custom configuration, I said. The resolution is documented in the Implementation Guide, Section 12. It requires coordinating changes across 3 different systems in a specific sequence. Brandon was frantically flipping through his copy of the manual. Which section exactly? Section 12, subsection 4.7 through 4.12, I replied. The process takes about 3 hours if you follow the step-by-step procedures. Raymond leaned forward. Can you handle this immediately? I checked my watch. I have the quarterly compliance review scheduled at 11 o'clock. That is due to federal regulators by the end of the day, so it cannot be rescheduled. The compliance review can wait, Victor said quickly. Cascade is more critical. I understand Cascade is important, I replied. However, missing the regulatory deadline results in automatic penalties and potential license suspension. That would affect all our clients, not just Cascade. The room went completely silent. You could practically hear everyone calculating the financial and legal consequences of this decision. What are our options? Raymond asked carefully. Well, Brandon could handle the Cascade issue using the documented procedures I suggested. It would be excellent training for him, and I would be available for questions between compliance review sessions. Brandon looked like a deer in headlights. I do not think I am ready for something this critical. The documentation is very detailed, I said encouragingly. Everything is laid out step by step. This is exactly the kind of hands-on experience you will need in your new role. Victor's face was getting red. Thomas, we need you to fix this personally. I am happy to take point on Cascade, I said. If you would like me to reschedule the compliance review, but I want to be clear about the regulatory consequences of doing so. Raymond held up a hand. Let us think this through. What would it take to handle both? I considered the timeline. The compliance review is scheduled in 2-hour blocks. I could handle the most critical Cascade fixes between sessions, but the full resolution would not be complete until after 5 o'clock. That is cutting it very close with Cascade's deadline. That is cutting it too close, the corporate executive noted. I agreed. In the past, I would have stayed until midnight to handle both, but I have been reflecting on work-life balance lately. My son has a baseball game tonight that I have already missed twice this month. The silence was deafening. Raymond finally broke it by asking to speak with Victor and the executives privately. Raymond finally broke the silence. Thomas, let me be direct. What would it take for you to handle this crisis the way you always have? I looked around the room at the faces staring at me. These people had relied on my expertise for 10 years, without ever acknowledging what I actually contributed. Now suddenly, my work-life balance was their emergency. Well, I said slowly, I suppose we should discuss what my role actually is here. Your role is to solve operational problems, Victor said tightly. According to my job description, my role is to manage daily operations within assigned scope, I countered. The Cascade implementation falls under project management, which reports to a different department. The corporate executive leaned forward. Are you saying you won't help? Not at all, I replied. I am saying that if we want to resolve this properly, we need to clarify responsibilities and authorities. Brandon is starting as Senior Operations Manager on Monday. Seems like an excellent opportunity for him to learn the systems. Brandon spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. Thomas, I appreciate your confidence, but I am not ready for something this high stakes. I turned to him with genuine kindness. Brandon, you have an MBA from Northwestern. You are smart and capable. The only difference between you and me is that I have seen these problems before. But every expert was once a beginner. But what if I mess it up, he asked. Then we will fix it, I said. That is how you learn. The documentation is comprehensive, and I will be available for guidance. Victor was getting impatient. We do not have time for training exercises. Actually, we do, I said. The Cascade issue is critical, but trying to bypass standard procedures is what caused it in the first place. If we do not follow the correct path now, we risk violating the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, Section 404, regarding internal controls. I pointed to the technical logs. Attempting to bypass the security protocols without proper verification will create material weakness in our reporting. Furthermore, if we fail to submit the compliance report on time, the Federal Maritime Commission can issue immediate penalties of up to $10,000 per day of violation. The corporate executives looked at each other. They knew I was right. The legal and financial risks of bypassing procedures were far greater than the temporary anger of a client. Raymond studied me carefully. Thomas, it seems like something has changed in your approach this week. You are right, I said. I have been doing some thinking about my career trajectory and what I want my legacy to be. And what conclusion did you reach? Raymond asked. That I have been enabling a system that does not work, I replied. By constantly stepping in to solve problems outside my official role, I have prevented the company from building proper processes and developing other people's capabilities. The room was quiet. Let me ask you something, I continued. What happens when I retire or decide to take that job offer from Summit Logistics Solutions? The corporate executive's eyes sharpened. What job offer? A competitor reached out last month, I said. Director of Operations, 45% salary increase, full remote flexibility. I had not responded yet because of my loyalty to Apex, but recent events have made me reconsider. I was not lying. Summit had reached out, though I had not seriously considered it until Victor passed me over. Raymond and the corporate executives exchanged glances. Victor looked like he was going to be sick. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Raymond said. Brandon, why don't you start reviewing the Cascade documentation with Thomas's guidance? Everyone else, let us step into my office. As Brandon and I walked to my desk, He seemed overwhelmed but genuinely apologetic. "Thomas, I want you to know I never asked my dad to give me this promotion," he said. "I know you deserved it." I stopped walking and looked at him. "Brandon, you seem like a decent person, but leadership is not about getting the title first and figuring it out later. It is about developing the competence to handle the responsibility. If you are serious about operations, you need to learn these systems inside and out." We spent the next hour going through the Cascade documentation. Brandon was actually quite sharp. He asked good questions and grasped concepts quickly. With proper mentoring, he could become a solid manager. Around noon, Raymond returned to my desk. "Thomas, could I speak with you privately?" he asked. We walked into his quiet office where the atmosphere was much calmer. We walked to Raymond's office where the corporate executives were waiting. I noticed Victor was not there. "Please sit down, Thomas," Raymond said. "I want to be completely transparent with you. We have made some serious mistakes in how we have managed this department." "What mistakes specifically?" I asked. The corporate executive spoke up. "We have created an unsustainable dependency on your expertise, without appropriate recognition or compensation, and we have allowed personal relationships to influence professional decisions. We would like to offer you the position of Director of Operations, reporting directly to me," Raymond said. "It comes with a 45% salary increase, authority to restructure the department as you see fit, and full hiring authority for 3 additional senior staff members. It was a very good offer. It was realistic, fair, and gave me the authority I needed." "What about Brandon?" I asked. "Brandon will start as an operations associate and work his way up under your guidance," Raymond explained. "If he demonstrates competence, he can advance based on merit." "And Victor?" Raymond shifted uncomfortably. "Victor will be transitioning to a strategic planning role. The operational departments will report through your office." So Victor was being moved sideways. It was accountability, not just revenge. "I need to consider this," I said. "Of course," Raymond replied. "But Thomas, I need an answer by Monday morning, and I would appreciate if you could help stabilize the Cascade situation today, regardless of your decision." I nodded. "I will handle Cascade this afternoon. Brandon can assist and take detailed notes." That afternoon, Brandon and I worked together on the Cascade Industries crisis. I walked him through each step of the resolution process, explaining not just what to do, but why each step mattered. He took detailed notes and worked hard. We wrapped up the Cascade fixes by 4:30. Their system was running smoothly again, and Brandon had a comprehensive set of notes. As I was packing up to leave at 5 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Dad, game starts at 6:30. Will you really be there?" I looked at the text. For 10 years, the answer would have been probably not. Tonight, the answer was different. Wouldn't miss it. I texted back. Tyler's baseball game was everything I had been missing. He pitched 4 strong innings, and I got to see him strike out the cleanup hitter. After the game, we went for ice cream. "Dad," Tyler said, "you seem different this week. Less stressed. Like you are actually here." That hit me harder than I expected. My 16-year-old son had been watching other fathers show up while his dad was stuck in meetings. Over the weekend, I thought long and hard about Raymond's offer. On Monday morning, I went straight to his office and accepted it under 2 conditions: full authority to develop talent based on merit, and the implementation of a comprehensive cross-training program, so no critical knowledge existed in only one person's head. Raymond agreed to both. The transition took about 8 weeks. I restructured the department and hired 3 excellent senior staff members. Brandon turned out to be a dedicated learner. Within 4 months, he was handling routine issues independently. The most surprising development was with Victor. Once he was not trying to manage operations he did not understand, he actually excelled at strategic planning. His big-picture thinking helped us land 2 major contracts. 9 months later, I was working at a sustainable pace. I was home for dinner by 6:30 most nights and present for all of Tyler's games. One evening, as Tyler and I worked on algebra, he asked, "So, you're like really important now?" "I was always important, Tyler. It just took them a while to figure it out." The best response to being undervalued is demonstrating your worth so clearly that it becomes impossible to ignore. I was finally being seen, and I was home for dinner every night. If you ever feel invisible at work, remember this. Your value does not disappear just because others cannot see it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop making their blindness your problem and start making your worth impossible to ignore. To ensure long-term stability, we established a culture where everyone's personal boundaries were respected. No one was expected to sacrifice their family time for basic tasks, and the operations became more resilient because of it. That is the true meaning of leadership, and I am proud to have built it at our company.